This is From the Mezzanine, a podcast all about film and TV. We are Matt and Chuck, and we're about to bring you a week's worth of pure film and TV commentary. We're not here to do overblown reaction faces, we aren't professional reviewers, and we don't trade positive reviews for special access. We're here to tell you what is the good, the bad, and the okay in this week that was film and TV. Chuck?
Yeah, there is no, paid, I guess, what's the term for it? Like, where there's no advertising in our show. We don't subsist off of Google AdSense. We don't cater to Susan. We paddle our own canoes. And there's a lot of different streams out there, rivers, lakes of content, oceans of it, frankly. And a lot of it is shit. There's a lot of shit out there, but there's also some stuff that you kind of have to poke at it a little bit before you're like, no, that is in fact shit. But there's always a diamond somewhere, and it's worth checking out. And we try and find those things ourselves and then bring that knowledge to you, those of you that watch us, you mighty few. But
you should be so lucky.
You should be so lucky. That's why you're here. You're the smartest men and women in the room. And we did have a parting question that it's kind of a doozy. I spent a lot of time actually at work thinking about it. I literally was like writing graphs and charts on my legal pad at the office. We have a whole bunch of news. Netflix continues to just do things that boggle the mind, and so does Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm. Matt, you got to catch up on The Staircase. Halo came to an end. There's some new additions from Apple TV Plus and Netflix as well, from like Love, Death and Robots. Season 3 is here, and Kendrick Lamar is back, and I haven't listened to it yet, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Okay, and of course, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour, Alex Garland, has arrived once again to divide movie goers and critics alike and make everyone wonder, what the ever-living fuck did I just watch? But before we get there, we have our parting question from last week, which was, of all the different aspects of a film, which ones matter the most to us personally? The 5 components of a film. And we'll just wait for them to flash up on the screen there. Directing, acting, score and sound, cinematography and editing, and then script and plot. Since this was yours, I'll kind of let you take it away.
Sure, yeah. So the way I kind of thought about it is, what do I look for in a film first and foremost, either, consciously or subconsciously? And I think number one is probably has to be directing. And I think the reason why I think that is because the directing kind of is the thing that wrangles the other 4 components. It's like the thing that if that fails, all 4 of the other things are quick to follow suit, basically. And other than that, it's just kind of it's one person's unique vision. They kind of make or break the film. They just have to wrangle so many things. And then number 2, I had script and plot. And mostly because it's literally the blueprint for the movie. Mm-hmm. Like, not just like the dialogue and stuff, but literally like stage direction and like setting. It sets the time and place, basically, in addition to being all the dialogue. And it's the very first thing that kind of spawns a film.
Yeah,
it's the inception point. And then number 3, I had acting, mostly because one performance can make or break a film.
Very true.
One instance of miscasting or one instance of a bad actor. I was actually like, the first thing I thought about when I was thinking about this was the movie Valerian. Do you remember that movie?
I do, very well. Yeah.
And I think about how badly miscast Dane DeHaan was in that, and then just how bad of an actor Cara Delevingne was.
Oh my god, she's
And
a nepotism project, which is
oh yeah,
which is how like the casting decision was the wrong one.
yeah, she's so bad, and I mean those two by themselves brought down the rest of the movie. I think otherwise that movie has a really good foundation, but they really brought it down. And then number 4, the cinematography and editing, just because. I mean, mostly for the editing. I do like cinematography a lot because it defines the look of a film, but editing literally puts a bunch of footage together to make a usable product. Basically, it makes a bunch of unusable footage all over the ground into an actual like tenable plot and story and stuff like that. And so, and then finally, I had score and sound, and I think it's mostly because out of all of these, I think it's the most expendable. We lived for what was it, like 20 years with silent films before they even put sound in movies.
They just had Wurlitzers, filling in the spaces.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not completely necessary to have sound in a movie for it to be successful, and score. While it's nice, a subpar score doesn't necessarily break a movie, but a really, really good score does enhance one. So yeah, that's kind of where I went with it. But yeah, what about you?
We for once we really have some divergence in our I guess view of things like this. Like I had score and sound in the same place. It's a nice feature. It's a nice addition. Like I had that in 5. It can add a texture. It can sometimes be the most memorable aspect of a film. But just because you have some, cool needle drops, it doesn't like actually make for a good movie. And at 4, I actually had the plot and the script, because I'm I have found as I've evolved as a oh cool. Sorry. I'll fill you in later. But I had as I've developed as like a film aficionado, if you will, I'm very formalist in like what I gravitate to. And so that kind of means that sometimes I can really enjoy a movie that doesn't have a lot of narrative or like dialogue or plot to it. Like if it can very much just be the tone poem, as it were, of like the cinematic experience. So it's cool. It can be nice, and sometimes there can be really creative, choices that are made there. But for me, oftentimes it's almost irrelevant to how I ultimately feel about a movie. Yeah, it's great that it's there, but there's so little true innovation and surprising things that come out of it lately that I don't really look for it. So I don't really, it doesn't hold a lot of weight for me most of the time. And I actually have directing at 3, because while they do wrangle everybody, sometimes a really pedestrian director is elevated by all the other artists and technicians working around them. And a really,
it's like every movie in the MCU.
Exactly. It's like they can, they're there, but what did they really do to make it all happen? I don't know. You know what I mean? They held an iPad and had a viewfinder, so I guess they did something. Yeah, it's like not to discount Auteur Theory. I definitely am a believer in it, and I'm a big fan of quite a few of them. But for me, like acting is at number 2, and cinematography and editing is at number 1. The like really great memorable performances not only make or break a movie, they can be the things that really stick with you the longest. Like after it's all like there's lots of people who circle jerk about their favorite director. I am guilty of that just like anybody else. Me. But as I thought about it, I was like, no, it's like who is in the center of the screen looking off into the middle distance, being able to actually nail that along with, taking the script and dialogue and doing something with it. Oftentimes, a lot of what is there isn't on the page to begin with. It's the like where cinema gets visceral is through the humans in front of the camera. And the editing and the cinematography for me are the aspects of movies that I am a fucking nerd about, and the stuff that I am really absorbed in whenever I'm watching something. As much as I love Christopher Nolan as a director and as a screenwriter, the people who are able to take his puzzle box of scripts and his his creative decisions and then make something out of it, is like, I respect those people a great deal. And there's so many stories throughout the history of cinema where a director either had no fucking clue what they were doing with what they had, but the editor did. Annie Hall was going to be this weird murder mystery until the editor got a hold of it and just was like, no, you just have like a rom-com here. And he fixed it. And George Lucas's wife saving Star Wars in the editing bay. That's another example of that. And so, yeah, I guess that's why I had them positioned where they did, because like a really good editing job can make, what would be a very boring or unmemorable experience, even more so. And, cinematographers have kind of become like movie celebrities in recent years, like Emmanuel Lubezki and Roger Deakins in specific, just because like they are sometimes as big as stars as the movie stars, just because their camera is so indelible, it is so identifiably them. And yeah, I guess that's where I ultimately came up on it. I had like 5 different sliding charts that I had drawn out before I settled on this one.
No, yeah, those are great. Yeah, I really like those. And yeah, I mean, I guess kind of the as I was doing this, the conclusion I came to is, everything is pretty important. And just because we ranked something lower or higher than another thing doesn't necessarily mean that it's not important. So that's kind of the conclusion I drew, because I reordered mine probably like 5 or 6 times.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, it's like you have your rough draft and you're like, wait a minute, no, that doesn't feel right. Because at the same time, we discount the efforts of people like gaffers and like best boys, and the key grips. Like, those are the people who really make the movies happen. All those other departments are nothing without them. The craft food people, for crying out loud. How come they don't get an Oscar for having like the best food service? It's a joke. It's a crime. But that was fun. I really enjoyed pondering that. But if you were watching a few weeks ago, we started the summer movie wager, and I decided on Friday to be able to check in and see where we were at a week, it's been like 2 weeks since it essentially kicked off.
Yeah, about a little over 2 weeks. And what are the big movies, I guess? Well, Doctor Strange, obviously.
Downton Abbey has come out as well. Yeah.
And I mean, that's pretty much it, right? What came out last week? What was it? Was there any big movies last week?
I don't think so. Because I'm just gonna pull it up now, because everything that's on there, I think Doctor Strange and Downton Abbey are the only ones from like the pre-season 15 that were even thought about. But I decided to check in and see where Matt and I were at in the global lists. And while I'm at like 1,600 or something like that, along with like 100 or 300 other people, Matt is sitting pretty at like 166. Granted, there's a lot of people who have his same score because there haven't been enough releases, so there's not a lot of points that have been delivered. And a lot of these points are going to change as the movies themselves change position. Yeah, because because right now the top 10 list is Doctor Strange at number 1 with 318 million. Downton Abbey, A New Era with 7.3. Firestarter 5.5. Family Camp 1.8, Men 1.4, filling in the top 5. Happening 142,000. On the Count of Three has 54,000.
Oh god.
The Innocents 18,000. Jazz, New Orleans Story, $10,800, and Mao, $7,500. I don't know what Mao is, but that's what's going on in theaters right now.
Okay. Yeah, it's not surprising. I think I'm hoping that Doctor Strange kind of slows down a little bit, because I think pretty soon here I'm gonna start bumping up against my tiebreaker question. Because
that's true.
I think I said 366. I think is what I said.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder. It's like if things are going to be, a little like if the COVID, factor isn't going to be as strong as it possibly and very likely could have been. I guess we'll see later in December. There's something called monkeypox going around. Yeah. But for right now, like that's a really healthy right out of the gate, for Doctor Strange. I guess people were here for it, and it kind of has the Sam Raimi effect. He's doing his thing. He has his fans. People, even if they're casual moviegoers, know who he is and have seen his movies at this point.
Yeah,
and
I think at this point, now that we've had a couple weeks to marinate on everything, I think Top Gun Maverick is going to do a lot better than anybody thought it was going to.
Yeah.
And especially considering all of the good press it's been getting in like the last 2 weeks with it's screened for critics now, and the critics love it, and then all of the stuff at Cannes about it, where it got like a 5-minute standing ovation, and Tom Cruise. There's that story going around about how Tom Cruise willed it not to go to streaming, and
they loved him for that. Yeah, because this movie could have been out. This movie could have been out on streaming 2 years ago, and since he and his producing partner have control over a lot more control over that than most people, in the industry, he gets to say no, and he got it. Is it true that they gave him a Palme d'Or?
An honorary one. Yeah.
How many people have gotten an honorary Palme d'Or? I can't imagine that many have.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think it's like a yearly thing. It's just like a thing that they kind of decide to do whenever they feel like it. So I'm not sure what exactly spurred that to happen, but
they did it.
Yeah, I guess.
God dang. Well, needless to say, a lot more excited for that than I was at any other point. Strictly, all the good press is surprising and shocking, but one thing I do want to bring up, is the fact that Kelly McGillis, is that right? She will not be in this because
correct, yeah,
because she
Jennifer Connelly
playing the romantic, lead, but because she looks her age, unlike Tom Cruise, which makes me wonder, maybe Scientology does work because this man is going to live forever. Is getting all of his body thetans out, making him live longer and stay young and robust. I guess we'll never know for sure.
Yeah.
What we do know for sure is that we have footage, 44 seconds to be exact, of... Oh, November just woke up.
Okay.
But of Prey, which is going to be on Hulu for some reason. And it's director of 10 Cloverfield Lane. I guess now I know that he's involved with it. Mm-hmm. But my question is, how interesting can it really be for a relatively primitive man, or human, right? I mean, taking on a technologically advanced predator species. What kind of a chance do they really hold against it? I know that Schwarzenegger went primitive when he beat, the original Predator, but that was after he exhausted all of his other options. So I just don't know like how much this can really interest me. Excuse me, everyone. I have to take care of a chop.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, that's a really good question, and I hope the movie kind of answers it. But I think this is kind of the real big change, hopefully, that this movie or this series needs, because they can't just keep making. They can't keep trying to recapture the feeling of the original, because that's what they've been trying to do for so long, and they can never get it, because it's kind of a fleeting thing, the feel of the original. And I hope this really shakes up the franchise. And the only thing that kind of still has me iffy is the fact that it's getting dropped on Hulu, which I think it either means that they have absolutely no faith in the movie and they just kind of want to crap it out, or the movie is much more of a smaller movie than we think it is, because
which could make it actually good and special. Yeah, because they're not swinging for the fences and missing horribly. But my concern is that I don't know, from the moment this was announced to when we're actually getting it, it feels like 2 seconds. Was this in the pipeline for a while, and they're just now being like, here you go?
I think this is one of the last leftover movies from the 20th Century Fox buyout.
I see. Okay.
And Disney's strategy with the movies that were kind of the leftovers of 20th Century Fox has kind of been this strategy where they're just like, whatever, put it on streaming, who cares? And so I think this is kind of the last remnants of 20th Century Fox. And I hope, though, that it means that it is smaller, because you would think a movie like this, that you would think that with the summer being as not crowded as it is, that they would try and position it as like a smaller blockbuster.
Yeah.
But they're not. So
instead, it's, basically the streaming version of shovelware.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Are you thirsty, honey? Oh, okay. You can't drink my coffee. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it reminds me, I think it is going to be a lot smaller than we think, because, going back to the director, Dan Trachtenberg, who did 10 Cloverfield Lane, he's kind of a smaller action movie director, because 10 Cloverfield Lane, I think, was only $10 million, the budget on that. And other than that, he's just done a bunch of like TV stuff. Like, I think he did an episode, the premiere of the season 2 of The Boys.
Okay.
And he was attached to the Uncharted movie for a while before he kind of took the easy way out and left that project. But
that project had so many different people working on it at various points. Remember when what's his name?
David O. Russell.
David O. Russell was gonna fucking do that at one point. God, imagine what that would have looked like.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, this doesn't really give us much to go on. It's just sort of a reaffirmation of the premise, basically.
Yeah.
Like, of what they've already told us. So.
And that is, but the first glimpses, though, just seeing the lasers just appear on that Comanche brave, it sets things up pretty interestingly. But as a student of history, the Comanche were horse people. Like that was the thing that set them apart, and why they were able to have a nation is because they got a hold of horses, and they just ran roughshod literally over all of their enemies, even the white man for a time. So I guess depending on when this is set, it could be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm hoping so.
All right, here you go. Have some coffee-flavored ice. She is not interested.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways.
You want to move on to Netflix? Or?
Yeah. So Netflix has a couple different things happening at once here. They are trying to pivot. They're trying to pivot in a couple different directions. On one hand, they are looking at what everybody else in the business is doing. Because what doesn't Netflix have? It doesn't have live sports. It doesn't have a Major League Baseball contract. It doesn't have Thursday Night Football like Amazon does. And it doesn't have like boxing and like UFC. Disney's got the ESPN situation. It's its own separate beast. But they're like, what kind of live streaming content are they actually going to be dipping their toes into?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of being positioned as doing like live stand-up shows, because they do have a lot of stand-up comedy specials, and then also like doing reunion specials for like their trashy reality TV shows, and then also like competition shows, so like their version of like American Idol or whatever.
Barf. Barf, 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 barf. So is any of this going to be pay-per-view, or is this what my $20 a month is going to be buying me?
I think it is going to be folded into the current subscription. I mean, I don't think they could get away with charging people much more, at least not anytime soon, because they did so many price hikes recently. But
that's true.
Yeah, I mean, this is just kind of them scrambling, I think. Like, I have this image in my mind of in the last couple weeks since Netflix had that big subscriber drop, I just have this image in my mind of their office on fire, and then a bunch of people running around like dumping like thimblefuls of water on the fire to try and put it out. And this is like just part of that.
Like that SpongeBob episode where there's just a dozen SpongeBobs running around and everything's burning. So because my mind just computes reality into meme speak. So the other version is the dog sitting in the house on fire saying, "This is fine, everything's fine." Yeah. But obviously Reed Hastings and his underlings are realizing, wait a minute, this is not fucking fine. Because every single day there's a new headline about, like, they're sending out culture memos. They're literally telling this woke population that they have hired and catered to for years to just pound sand. Just like, fuck off, we're done. Like, we're simplifying our lives, and it's very shocking because like they had that initial that big firing, the layoff fest that they did like a few weeks ago, and they on the 17th they literally had another round where they fired even more, like 150 people.
Yep.
But a lot of it is still in like their advertising, and marketing divisions. So are they just kind of realizing that was all a lot of hokum, and like the algorithm, which is engineered, is helping them more than whatever these human beings were doing for them?
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, because they've been living so like high and mighty for so long that I'm sure they had all of these super redundant positions, and they just were fine with it because they were making so much money for so long, and they were ever expanding. And then suddenly, that all stops, and they have to do all of this stuff to scale back, and everything. I mean, this all just seems like very small time. Like, this is a Band-Aid for like a leg being sawed off, basically. And it's like not, I mean, I'll say if it were me, in my completely inexperienced mind, I think the solution is you cut back on your content, you get better quality control on the content that you do produce, and then you cordon off the app into separate sections, kind of like HBO does, where instead of everything being on one page like it is now, you put all of the crappy reality stuff on one page, you put all the narrative stuff on one page, you put all the kids stuff on one page, because their current homepage is so messy.
It literally is. It's impossible to really find anything you want to, and even like just to locate like the feed of things that I have watched recently. Even I have trouble finding that sometimes, because they stack like here is our new releases, here is our top 10 for the week, and it's all shit I never want to watch. Like, I have come this fucking close to just cutting the cord on Netflix completely. Like, I am week to week with them. You know, until it's basically, I'm here to watch Stranger Things and then take a break for like 6 months until the next section comes out, or however long the break in between, parts it is. But I like the idea of it siloing stuff, because Netflix was all about movies, like when they were just a DVD mailer service, and they were where people who didn't like reality TV went, because that's all that cable became, was reality TV and bullshit competition shows. And now that Netflix has like sunk so much fucking money into that kind of garbage, I have little interest in supporting it anymore, unless I can get some guarantee that they are truly going to try and live up to this notion that, because like they behave more and more like they want to be a movie studio and not a tech company. Well, that means not just greenlighting every last thing that gets thrown in your face. Like, I was researching Love, Death, and Robots, and that came to be because Tim Miller got fired off of Deadpool 2, and David Fincher was like, hey, bud, why don't we just go to Netflix and do that robot anthology series you've been talking about? They'll do anything.
Yeah.
Which he was right about.
Especially with Fincher. I mean, Fincher's like their golden boy now, and so he can get anything done at that company. But yeah, it's strange, and I guess to kind of bring it back to the live streaming thing, like, I don't see the point, because what is the point of live streaming when an hour later, after the live stream ends, I can just watch the same show but not live? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I agree.
Like, if you want to do a live stream thing and make it interesting and make it have a point, do a stand-up comedy special where you have to be at a certain place at a certain time, and it streams live, and then don't upload it.
And then it's gone. Yeah, make it an NFT. Make it special, make it non-fungible. Because like that's the whole point of the live experience that gives it any value, is it is a magical moment that you're present for, and then it's gone, and all that's left is the stories. And they obviously have been doing that, because they haven't been live streaming or broadcasting or even recording these Netflix comedy festivals that they've been doing all over the country, unless that is the plan, and they've been like workshopping it and like lab testing it, behind the scenes. But yeah, like, obviously people want to see this kind of thing all over the country. They want to see Dave Chappelle do new bits from everybody. So like, I could see there being some value to it, but just having it be another in a long list of comedy specials I won't watch, they're not going to get me. If I know that it's not going to be on Netflix past a certain point, I might tune in for it. It might be, because Netflix has never been about being, what's the expression that we use? Like appointment television. Yeah. Netflix is just there, and it's always going to be there, and there's no pressure. Create some pressure. Create some urgency in your audience, and they may have a reason to stick around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. You gotta make some things fleeting, or you gotta weaponize FOMO, basically.
Basically, that's exactly it. And I'm surprised that with a company that values, algorithmic psychological examination of an audience and a user down to the individual user as much as they do, that they haven't keyed in on that and figured it out. Because other people have, arguably. Like a few weeks ago, Angie and I watched one of those creator clashes, those YouTube celebrity boxing charity events. Yeah. And if you like boxing, it was not enjoyable. But if you like seeing people who trained to box in like maybe a few hours a day for 6 months, who you usually watch, get high and play Mario Kart, it could be enjoyable for you, but it's a magical moment and then it's gone. If there's and then there might be some clips from it that are worth coming back to, but being swept up and captive to the moment, that is a special thing that usually is reserved for like UFC matches and things like that. But I don't know, like it's unique, and they could definitely do the exact same thing, because if the Paul brothers have proven anything, there is an insane amount of money to be made off of doing shit like that. So get with the program. Speaking of getting with the program, I don't think Kathleen Kennedy really has. The latest in the saga of what is going on with Star Wars is the thing that she's going to do to put her stamp on it is to just be like, trilogies were never that cool anyway. We're just gonna do singular movies. And so they're shelving Rian Johnson's doomed from the start unique trilogy he was going to do. The boys, the whatever the fuck they were called, Benioff and Weiss, are no longer doing theirs because Netflix came a calling and wrote them way too much, gave them a check for too much fucking money because they haven't made a fucking thing for them yet. They're as bad as Prince Harry and his his wife, whatever her name is. So the plan now is just singular films, and TV. Like that is what is going to be Star Wars from here on out. It's the Marvel-fication of Star Wars. How do we feel about this approach?
Well, I mean, I think it's obvious they're just doing what's been working for them for the past, 3 years. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, TV's fine, but I think you eventually need to return to making Star Wars blockbusters, because I think you risk, if the future of Star Wars becomes purely TV or mostly TV, you risk it becoming sort of like Star Trek, where it becomes kind of like really antiquated and really like a lot more smaller of a scope. And this will be fine for a while, I think, but I want to see, in 5 years from now, I want to see the next big Star Wars movie again, and whatever that means, whatever that is.
Is it going to be Taika Waititi's Star Wars movie?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know anything about that. They announced that, I think, with this Vanity Fair article that kind of dropped all this information, and I have no idea what that could even be. But they also revealed John Watts, the director of the latest Spider-Man trilogy, is doing a 1980s inspired, Amblin inspired kids adventure film.
So basically what this thing is, it's since Amblin was part of the Lucasfilm purchase.
No. I think it's still owned by Spielberg.
Okay, so this is just them. This is just more like J.J. Abrams bullshit. Just homages to the master.
Yeah, it's like Super 8. J.J. Abrams Super 8, yeah.
Okay. So that could be cool. It would be really cool as if it was a lighthearted Goonies type Amblin movie. I could be there for that, depending on what it is. Yeah. But one thing that was kind of, I don't know if it's in the article or if it was just a follow-up, but they basically insinuated that we learned our lesson from the Solo movie failing, and we've also learned our lesson from everyone loving CGI Luke, and we are no longer going to see new actors playing the young version of characters we already know.
Okay.
So
I didn't see that, but yeah, that that makes sense. I just think they need to get away from this entire like trilogy, or the entire Skywalker saga, as they call it now.
Yeah.
Like, let's stop doing all of the interconnected movies. Let's stop making movies that are set on Tatooine, and let's do a Star Wars movie that's 1,000 years after this
that could be cool.
these 9 movies. So,
that could be cool.
Yeah, that could be really cool. Or way before, do like a Shadows of the Empire movie, or not a Knights of the Old Republic movie.
And I think they're talking about that, or at least a High Republic, series. I think is what I remember them talking about. But yeah, like I do agree that they run the danger of cheapening what Star Wars represented. Was that Chris Gore, that guy that's been a big, like, maybe I got his name wrong, but he did a lot of like film courage, like interviews where he lambasted how the sequel trilogy was handled and just what they did.
Chris Gore, from Film Threat,
yeah. And he, because he's kind of right. It's like this is on the Rushmore of cinema, as much as that might piss people off, but there's like Citizen Kane, and then Star Wars is right fucking up there next to it. So why are we just putting him onto a smaller, and why are we putting this franchise onto a smaller and smaller screen? Like they're creating content that people are watching on their phones in airports, and that is that is a very sad thing, to an extent. But I understand why it's going in that direction. But we gotta hope. I guess we'll see it with this next Thor movie. I guess maybe he has proven that Taika Waititi. Maybe he's proven himself that he can think big and boldly and have movies with heart and all of this, all these bells and whistles and effects in it, and actually make it work in a way that not even George Lucas could. But they have to move beyond to an enormous degree what we already know. Like, as cool as Obi-Wan might look as a TV show, I just don't know how interested I am. After that Boba Fett thing, I really lost interest, because they might as well have just given us the few episodes that were just Mando prequels, and I would have been fine with that. Just done specials. Like, if Euphoria can give us 3 hours of additional content between seasons, that's what The Mandalorian should have done.
Yeah.
Okay, but Kathleen Kennedy, I still don't like her. I do not approve of her attitude, but at the very least, maybe she has kind of learned something from the failings that have happened recently. Mm-hmm. But moving ahead in our timeline here, I just need to exit out of my full screen and reorient myself. Yeah, theatrical releases. This week there really wasn't a heck of a lot, but we did have one thing that popped up on streaming for me that was new, and it's the latest project from the duo behind McMillions, if you remember watching that. And this was on Apple TV Plus, and it's another rip from the headlines, sort of deal. Bear with me here while I get everything set up. But back in like the early, teens of this century, if you were paying attention to like Washington, like scandals, there was a massive Medicare fraud, like a half a $500 million in Medicare fraud. And it was perpetuated by this like social security disabilities claims lawyer who is as big a character as Joe Exotic was, when you actually like peel back all the different layers of the man and just how like eccentric and just like volatile they are. And it's a really crazy story, and there's a lot of moving parts to it, and like it's only 4 episodes long, but it has recreations in it like McMillions did. And you get to really, Raven Riley makes a cameo, if you remember her from, dipping around on the internet as a young man in the mid 2000s.
Is that a porn star?
Yes, she is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like basically he was like, "Hey, Obama's got Obama girl. I should have my own girl," and he puts her in his commercials. But it's a really the human damage wrought by it is intense because there were people just trying to get help. That he was essentially corrupting a judge and other doctors to get like a fast track for people who needed their Social Security disability claims processed immediately, because there's a huge backlog that had been neglected for decades, and then suddenly they were trying to address it. So there was just like instant money if you could get a judge to stamp it. And
Okay.
but the fallout from it and how bizarre the story gets, there's lots of twists and turns. This is really watchable and well worth 4 hours of your time.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that it's only four parts, because the one thing about McMillions was it was way too long. Like, oh my god, I there wasn't enough there to justify how long it was. So I'm glad to see that this one's a little shorter.
Yeah, no fluff. There's just meat, and they've dumped it all out at once, which I also appreciated. Because they could have petered it out, but they kind of realized, no, this is enjoyable as a binging experience. There's not a lot of cliffhangers to string you along, because even like Tiger King got obscenely boring after a while, and to such an extent that I never finished watching part 2, and I never watched the spin-offs about the other creatures in that story. But this guy is a character, and like Joe Exotic was ready and willing to be interviewed from prison. And the man literally, while he was on the run from the government, he wrote like a manifesto, like a handwritten, like, manuscript that's like this big, and they literally just like have like an actor reading it. So you get like from the moment he's born until he's in the slammer, you get the whole story from the horse's mouth, and it's pretty fucking funny. And ultimately, tragic, because to this day there still are people trying to get their lives back together because they thought that this guy was just helping them, but really he was just putting them in the same precarious position that he was in, because it was all just this big scheme, and as soon as it was found out, they all got the hammer thrown at them by the federal government.
Oh,
but
sure.
It's not really, I didn't really know anything about this. It was just a headline I read years ago, and now I get to know the full story. So that's why I appreciate things like this, because there is a lot happening in the world, and it doesn't always get the spotlight put on it. And that's what true crime documentaries should do.
Yeah.
And speaking of true crime documentaries, you got to check out The Staircase finally, and at least the HBO show. And what's your takeaway from having to have you fully caught up?
No, I haven't. I don't need to spend a whole lot of time on this because you had talked about it last week, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again when the series wraps up. But this show is so much better than it has any right to be, and it's just like the opposite of all of those like shitty like Hulu true crime shows that have been coming out at such like a rapid pace in the past like year or so. And I didn't realize it was Antonio Campos. Yeah. The guy who did Martha, what is it? Martha May, Marlene.
Yeah. There's the 4 M's. The debut of Elizabeth Olsen.
Yeah. And it's really well directed, and I wanted to just call out a couple of awesome scenes in it. The first one is in the first episode, they're all kind of like mourning around a dinner table, and then somebody brings in a birthday cake.
Yeah.
They start singing Happy Birthday, and it's like the saddest version of Happy Birthday ever sung, and because they're all still mourning the death of Kathleen. And that scene was just incredible. And then there was another one in the most recent episode I watched, which was the third one, where all of the people on Michael Peterson's side are getting into an elevator at the courthouse, and then all of the people who are against him like appear outside of the elevator wanting to take it up also. And they all just kind of stand there staring at each other, and then as the elevator doors are closing, the camera does these really, really quick shots of each of their faces, and it's just really, really well done. And Yeah, I really enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to catching up on it, and we'll talk about it again, I'm sure. But the one thing I would warn people of, which kind of seems to be the trend with these HBO shows lately, is there is some sort of fudging of the facts in this, where with Juliette
Binoche.
Binoche, her character, they sort of make it seem like she was starting a relationship with Michael Peterson while the case was still going on.
Yeah.
Which would have been like a major like ethics. Oh, they just showed the part, the elevator part in the trailer, but major ethics violation. But she in real life didn't start the relationship until after I think everything was done with.
Exactly.
Or something like that. So,
yeah. Until he had gotten like an appeal through, and then he was out, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess if I had any advice, as good as the show is, I would recommend, kind of seeking out the true facts for yourself. Maybe even watching the Netflix series that.
Oh my god.
But
because it's like 14 hours long now at this point.
Yeah, it's a long time. So, but yeah, just be careful of those things, and I do really think HBO should put some sort of warning before the show starts. But yeah, I mean it's not that huge of a deal. There's something to be said about the argument for artistic license. So
yeah, is kind of the thing. Like, I think about Spencer from last year. Did we really were we pissed at Stephen Knight for just doing his thing when we clearly Diana didn't run in front of a firing line during a pheasant shoot so that she could take her sons to KFC? Like, you know what I mean? Like, in retrospect, that whole moment is so bizarre because he's such a sweet boy and it's so brutal, but she has no issue with the factory farming that created the fried chicken they enjoyed in London. But yeah. That's beside the point. But there's a lot of weird things that you can do that are just dramatic and artistic and fun. And and there are some things in the very latest episode that, while not factually true, romanticize the characters and the very real relationship they did have. Their courtship just probably looked quite different from how it's portrayed. Even though they're still not together today, but there was a time where they were, and they needed to at least have something happening in the show that the documentary doesn't convey on its own. So I can understand it, but they need to respect the subjects and give them a fucking heads up that they're doing it, because the French director of it is just like, what the fuck? Of the original documentary, he's like, what the hell, guys? I trusted you. You had Campos doing this. Like, he's a guy I respect, and then you do me dirty like this? Like, they need to do better, basically. It's a trite thing to say, but when you're playing with stories like this, you owe it to everyone to do better than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All
right. I'm just gonna... No, yeah, well, actually, I won't bring up a trailer, because... Of our next thing, because I haven't finished this myself, but I imagine we're just going to be briefly touching on it.
Because
it wrapped up. Halo season 1 is done. Season 2 is confirmed. Are we in trouble?
Yeah, oh man, I don't even know what to make of this show anymore. It's so off the reservation that it's just like. It's alienated everyone at this point, all of the fans of the video game and
the creators of Halo Combat Evolved, the men who were there when the legends were written are also tearing their hair out.
Yeah, and it's just like they're just doing whatever they want, and it's so strange the direction they're going. Like the Halo is some sort of like dreamlike other dimension that you go to or something like that, and it's so strange. And the finale was just very anticlimactic, and what they did, this is what everybody predicted too, was they basically teased the actual appearance of the Halo from the games for season 2.
Barf.
So,
and see, if you know anything about the Halo games, it literally is just something that mankind crashes into while they're fleeing the bad guys. And they're just like, holy fuck, what is this thing? And instead, it's this thing that they apparently all are looking for. But what is obvious and should have been something we had come to terms with before the series came out was that it would be like this, because they said themselves in press, the creators of this, that they knew nothing about the games and did not give a shit, and they were basically just working with the most basic aspects of lore to build their own thing. And what they are building with it is just boring. Like, I compared this to Mass Effect when we were first talking about this, like when the episodes were first coming out, and it really feels like that's all that this is. And the Flood hasn't even shown up yet. And I doubt that the people making this even know what the Flood is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
you're right about that. I mean, I guess they get some sort of props for not false advertising the show as some sort of reinvention of the games. They were very upfront about them doing their own thing, but at this point, I just wonder kind of who this is for.
That's the question.
Like the gamers don't like it, and I can't imagine that a person just like regular Joe Schmo watching the show even knows what's going on or has any sort of reverence for any of the characters in this. So.
Yeah, because like the fans of the new Star Trek that is on Paramount Plus are just going to look at this and just be like, this is fascist propaganda, and they'll have no interest in it. And so they've made a product that nobody likes and will not have an audience grow organically for it. So we're getting a second season, but it'll be wasted money. And one thing that is really shocking though to me, and kind of confirms that even Microsoft and 343 Industries know how much of a turd this is. There is no integration or synergy with the actual games. There's no like celebratory get the version of, get the skin from the show. There's none of that. There's none of that. They haven't integrated Maquis into Halo Infinite or something like that. That's all just its own thing that even the people who own the IP are embarrassed about. And it's unfortunate because it's one of the most important video game franchises and pop culture franchises we have. And they're treating it rather shoddily.
Yeah.
But I guess that's why we should appreciate people who are doing new and inventive things. Because, good golly, Miss Molly, Love, Death, and Robots is back, and it still fucking rules. I've seen a couple episodes from the latest season. I've watched the David Fincher one first, and that was fucking rad. It was that was really fucking cool. Because it is nice to see people like adapt short stories again. That used to be something that the Twilight Zone did and the Outer Limits did on television, and it's just refreshing that that there is somebody in the realm of sci-fi, doing that kind of thing and doing it in animation, no less.
Yeah, it's like I said last week, it's so nice to have something that's kind of geared for adults that's not anime. And this show, it keeps getting better too. Like, I think that this batch of episodes, I've seen all of them now. I was able to get through all of them. And this batch of episodes is probably, for the most part, the strongest of the 3 seasons. And there's 2 in here that I would say watch them all, but if you had to skip a couple of them, I would say number 5 and 6.
Well, because that's a distinction, or something that needs to be said. They randomize the episode order depending on. Yeah, that's something they've done since season 1. So it really doesn't help. Like, you have to actually look at the title. Because the numbering is irrelevant.
Okay. Well, these are the two I was speaking of are called Kill Team Kill and Swarm.
Okay.
And Kill Team Kill is kind of I don't know, it's just one big long action scene that has some really, really bad humor that kind of reminds me of like the Borderlands video games.
Okay, yeah.
And then Swarm is kind of it's kind of reminds me of like jumping into a plot during the second act where you don't see the first or the third act. It's kind of just like the middle section of a longer movie, sort of, and it's just not very interesting. But the ones that I would say to definitely watch, of course, would be the Fincher one.
Bad Traveling. Yeah,
Bad Traveling. Just so good. And that one looks so nice. And I love how it's lit, where everything's lit with either a lantern or like a torch. And the lighting is so good in that one.
Take it from Fincher to make something in CG and just be like, we're all natural lighting. That's all we're going to use.
Yeah. And then the other two I would recommend for sure would be what is it called? Night of the Mini Dead, which is the shortest one. It's only about 6 minutes. And that one is... Did you see that one?
Just the clips of the trailers. It just made me laugh, just the concept of it.
Yeah, it's so cool. The way it's animated, it looks as if you're kind of looking down on like a model train city, like a Warhammer 40K setup.
Okay.
You know, like a giant, where everything's little like minifigures almost. And I think it's CG. I don't think it's stop motion, but it's made just to look like that. And it's just kind of a nice little 6-minute short about the zombie apocalypse. And but the one I would definitely recommend, I think probably my favorite of all of them, even over the Fincher one, is Jabaro.
And that's the one with the weird, like, you know, the soldiers in armor, and it's like a robot doll in a waterfall. Yeah.
Well, it's like they're like conquistadors, and they come upon a siren, I think is what she is, and basically she seduces all of them to kill themselves, except for one of the guys who's deaf.
Oh, okay.
And that one is awesome. It looks so good, and it has a very unique like editing style where it almost seems like everything is sped up to 1.5 times speed, and so it's very frenetic and it's very like fast paced, and that is probably my favorite of the ones of all of them. And
because they're all visually inventive, but yeah, that one does stand out, and it's on. I'm gonna probably watch through that later on today. Just burn through like the rat one. That one looks really fucking weird. Yeah. And yeah, but in general, very happy to have this kind of heavy metal, you know, sci-fi sort of thing. And if Netflix could make stuff this daring and this entertaining more frequently, we wouldn't slag them so much.
Yeah. Yeah, this is kind of an anomaly for them, especially because they just axed their entire like animation department.
No shit, right? Yeah. Good thing that Blur Studio, and like Blur Studio obviously doesn't do everything that's in Love, Death, and Robots, but Tim Miller obviously is a big reason behind why this thing happened at all. And they're never going out of business. They're too good at what they do. Speaking of being too good at what they do, we have a couple mentionables that essentially they're both like kind of musical, you know, mentionables. One of them is a literal musical, but we finally got a return of the king, if you will, after a long hiatus, because I don't really count the Black Panther soundtrack, even though a lot of people jizzed over it. But our boy Kendrick Lamar is back once again with Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. And I've only really listened to the video that we have here is N95. But what is the general takeaway from our boy being back?
Yeah, it's really good. It's just a really, really well made album. It's I wouldn't necessarily, it's kind of towards the latter half. If somebody is looking for this album purely for like the enjoyability factor, purely to, get some good beats and good rhymes, I would say listen to the first half and then stop, because the second half gets pretty heavy. And the N95 is probably the best song. It's the obvious single of the album. It's probably the song that'll live on long after the album is forgotten, the rest of the album. And I really like the beat on that. It kind of sounds like it reminds me of like one of the songs on like a stage from Streets of Rage.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, other than that, it's a great album. I don't necessarily this isn't my favorite version of Kendrick Lamar. I personally, just so people get an idea of what I like of his the best, I think he peaked with Good Kid, Mad City, and I haven't really enjoyed a lot of his output before this album. Like his more socially conscious albums, Damn and To Pimp a Butterfly. Yeah. And I really like Good Kid, Mad City, though, and I still remember when Section 80 came out in 2011, and it was being passed around the internet as a mixtape before.
That's right.
Yeah, and that was incredible. I still have such because that was kind of his his first, and where he was more concerned with making good beats and making really really great rhymes,
going hard. Yeah. So yeah, because as much as I liked To Pimp a Butterfly, Good Kid, Mad City is still the one I actually come back to as well. It's the one that is still creative. It's not up its own ass. As much as I love having Thundercat like just doing bass licks the entire time, like the production on that is still more memorable than pretty much anything he's done since then. Which is too bad, because it's not that he's resting on his laurels. He's obviously working really hard. But Kendrick kind of has the Kanye problem, where like it just seems like people will love anything he does, and he knows it to a degree. Yeah. Like he knows that the movie stars that are his friends will just like, I don't know. It's like it's a side thing that happens to pretty much any artist after a certain point. But you always have the one that you love from them, and then there's everything that comes after. Like Weezer, for example, like they have two good albums for me personally, and it's their first two. But the people, I worked with a 16-year-old at the Craftcade for a stretch, and her conception of what Weezer is much different from mine, even though we both say that we love Weezer.
Yeah, it's he seems very like on this album more than any of the others. He seems incredibly jaded and like angry, like just very fed up with how, I don't know, I guess just how like fake everything has turned out in his life as he's gotten more popular, as he's gotten more rich and surrounded himself with people that aren't necessarily his friend because they like him. And, he just seems very, very jaded, and I'm very curious to see what the reaction to this album is going to be as more and more people listen to it, because he clearly does not give a fuck about like what like the popular music reviewers on the internet think, like Anthony Fantano's, what have you. And he I don't know if you've heard about it, but there's a song on here where he drops a whole bunch of F words, the F word that you use to describe a gay person.
The only F word that matters anymore.
And that I won't say because I don't want us to get shadow banned, but it's pretty, like, it reminds me of like early Eminem almost, where he just does not give a fuck about what any sort of music critic has a think piece about how he shouldn't be saying these words, and stuff like that. So very curious to see kind of what the legacy of this album will be.
We'll just have to, time will tell, because he very well could be, like Elon Musk, the golden days might be behind him after this, if he's gonna, because Tyler the Creator, it took that man coming out for people to forgive him for dropping the F slur as much as he did. But actually have to listen to the full album. I haven't listened to like new music in a stretch. And as soon as I saw him drop this, I was like, well, they got me again. I actually have something to care about. And this is like our next mentionable. Angie has a friend who's a really accomplished tattoo artist, a tattooist. You know, she usually works out of Florida, but she comes back to Minot every once in a while just to work with the local clients that she still has. And she hit Angie up to be like, hey, I have this piece I want to do, and I want someone to do it on. You know, give you a discount, let you do it. And, you know, and I'll, you know, if I can, you know, use you. And Angie was like, I'm down, I'm here for it. So now she has the Dolly Parton Playboy cover as like the basis for a tattoo on her. And it looks really good, actually. It's not tacky, because this girl is that skilled. But I mistook it, and I was like, oh, that's got to be from the best little whorehouse in Texas. So we rented it on video on demand for like $4, and it was $4 well spent. I'll just say that. Like, 80s boobies have never looked this good. But the music is fun, and you know, it's just a good time. And it's amazing that something this subversive could exist, but of course it existed in the 80s and the 70s when this is what Hollywood was about. But Dom DeLuise is fucking hilarious, you know, just seeing him prance around in his outfits. And of course it's got Burt Reynolds, and you know, Burt Reynolds doing his thing. And yeah, I had just seen this on TV when I was a kid, but it's not until you grow up that you realize, oh, the TV version of any movie is never like what the movie really is. You know, so it was, yet even Gomer Pyle makes an appearance. This movie is just a good time. So I recommend it. You know, it might be a strange thing to recommend, but best little whorehouse in Texas was well worth the $4 to, you know, rent it for 48 hours.
Yeah, you know, I'm in the same boat as. So had you seen it in its entirety before this?
Only on CMT. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. I think I'm in the same boat. I remember pieces of the movie from my childhood, like just fleeting memories, but I've never, I don't think, sat down and watched the whole thing.
It's just one of those movies. It's like it's what a lot of people think of when they think of Dolly Parton for some reason.
Yeah.
Because like she did have an actress phase. I think of Steel Magnolias, which was definitely classier. But you know, this is obviously a little cheesy and it's Hooters of musicals. Yeah. You know, it's tacky, but it's delightfully fun, and one could argue family quality entertainment. You know, as long as you're covering up the kids' eyes during certain sequences. But definitely stands the test of time. Looks decent, you know, in an upgraded format. You know, a lot better than VHS or, you know, standard definition as it's edited together on VH1 or CMT or AMC or whoever was, you know, showing it in a programming block in the early 2000s when I saw it, because I was a horny young man looking for any glimpse of flesh as I could. But I guess that is as decent a segue as we can get into the issues of misogyny in society, which we all got a lesson in the theater this weekend, because both of us checked out the latest from Alex Garland. We saw Men. And I guess before we get into it, yeah. I just want to read, is it Max Brooks? Not Max Brooks. What the fuck is his name? The guy that wrote, like American Ultra. He's been canceled since then. Max Landis. He had 2 reviews that he put out on Instagram. One was for Chippendale Rescue Rangers, and one was for Men. But I feel like, as much as this guy's kind of a cheesehead and I don't pay attention to him, I feel like he kind of nailed this movie. Personally, okay. I love a movie with nothing to say. Not exciting, not scary, and abuse allegory so vague and harmless it makes The Shining look like a 9-page Me Too article. No statement about women or men or men's relationships to women, about relationships, no statement at all, just sort of vague nothing, not enough to get male rights activists angry, just literally nothing. Just a lot of shots of extremely green plants. And even though that isn't really fair, he's kind of right. You know, there are things about Men that I thought were really good, obviously, like I talked about at the top. The cinematography and the editing and some of the acting is really stupendous. But as our thumbnail for this video, you know, illustrates, and as you put it in your write-up, it's a mile wide and an inch deep. There's nothing to it once you actually dip your toes in. It's literally up to your toes. But without, you know, depending on Mr. Landis to review this movie, what did you think of it as you walked out? Like, did you find your brain? How many rows away from you was it?
Yeah, well, it was like, oh man, I knew going into this movie that it was about an hour 40, and the movie keeps you guessing for a long time. It keeps you in the dark for a very long time. And once I kind of, you know, was thinking in my head, okay, probably about an hour and 20 minutes have gone by. And at that point, I realized this movie was going to go nowhere because I was like, there can't be that much left in this movie. And there's no way they can even, because the movie doesn't even really have a plot. So it's like, no. you cannot introduce a plot and wrap it up in this short amount of time. So this movie is just, there's going to be nothing to it. And I kind of resigned myself to that fact about an hour and 20 minutes into watching it. And then boy, it gets, I don't know. I don't even want to say like, I mean, I guess crazy, but it not necessarily like in a good way.
Yeah. And it's like, as I was watching it, I was like, I have seen crazier things than this, you know, like, which is kind of an indictment of it, because my expectations were enormous based on some spoiler-free reviews I had read. Like, I knew after a certain point it was going to go places. And I was along for the ride, but it's very pedestrian. Even when it's being extreme, it's very pedestrian. And it's just not a word I've ever used to describe Alex Garland personally. But now I will say that about this movie.
Yeah, for sure. Everything that's wrong with this movie falls on his part in it. Because, like you said, the acting was great. The way the movie was shot was great. The score was awesome. But everything involving him is just so, like, such a misstep, so misguided. Like, I don't understand the reasoning behind why he decided to do this movie, because it has no elements of sci-fi. It's if anything, just a slow burn horror movie. And it has none of his sort of trademarks, his hallmarks. And it deals with a subject with which, and I don't have a problem with this, but just to kind of get it out of the way, it deals with a subject he has absolutely no personal experience with. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure he'll get a lot of flack for that. I don't really care. You know, I think anybody should make a movie about anything they want, but
because there's been plenty of men to make movies in this wheelhouse. Like, like Lars von Trier is, you know, one very obvious one. Like a movie like Possession is another. We could go on and on and on. Like Dario Argento. You know, like there's a lot of male directors and filmmakers and screenwriters who have inhabited what we would call feminist horror. But this just ultimately has nothing interesting to say about it. You know, it's unimaginative to its core. Even when it's trying to be show-stoppingly surreal and, you know, bizarre, it's you're looking at, like, there another review that I came across was from The Guardian, A.A. Dowd, and he was just like, can we have less obvious, and like metaphors in our horror films? Because that's a lot of what this movie is a metaphor. He teases you with imagery like that's, and like in a soundtrack that borders on like the primeval and pagan, where like there's just these pre-language like verbal sounds just permeating it. Like it goes from churchy choral stuff to you're like it's caveman type stuff, and it just oscillates between it. And he never bothers to give the audience any real context for the imagery he's showing, like that stuff in the church with like the man with the leaf foliage for a face, and the like fertility goddess exposing her vagina. All of that stuff is just kind of just there to just be shocking and uncomfortable, but it doesn't go anywhere. And he doesn't like there's nothing deeper narratively or textually beyond just being like, oh, I saw this in a book that I was researching from, and now I'm gonna just make it a part of my movie. There's no connective tissue to anything else, when that's what would have made it more interesting and effective ultimately.
Yeah, it almost seems like a movie that's like tailor-made for like film students to pour over.
Yes, like the YouTube analysis is gonna have a fucking fun time. Like they're gonna make so much hay out of explaining this movie to people on YouTube who aren't even gonna bother to watch it. Like that is who this movie was made for. Like the what I wrote down in my like film journal after I watched this was, it's almost like Alex Garland had an Alex Garland AI created to direct this movie for him, because that's kind of what it feels like. It's like it's a vague approximation of the kind of movie he would make based on his prior output, and that's what we got. There is no heart and soul to this whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I mean, to go back to that point about the film students pouring over it, like that's what's going to happen, I'm sure, and people are going to dissect it so much and come up with their own theories, but it's almost like, to what end? Because there's so little to grab onto in this movie. There's so few breadcrumbs that you don't even have a modicum of whether or not your theory could possibly be correct, because there's so few breadcrumbs that you have to pull so much stuff out of your ass. You have to pull so much stuff out of your personal headcanon for what you think is going on, that it's just like, who cares, because you have no idea of whether or not your theory has even a chance of being true, because there's so little to grasp onto. And so it's just like, and that goes back to, there just being such an absence of a plot, and it's just kind of a series of images. And
because what narrative there is very basic, and it's a woman escaping trauma to the country, trying to get away from something bad that happened, that is slowly revealed to us, and is of course the only core that this movie has when you get down to it. Because like, what is her character's name again? Harper, is that right?
Harper.
Yeah.
Yep.
And she's FaceTiming with her friend on occasion, because obviously this is a COVID movie. And so she's just hanging out in this tiny town, and it slow burns its way up to moments of tension, but a lot of it is just wide shots of green foliage and like green fields. Like the color green is all over this movie. And there's lots of obvious like Adam and Eve shit going on. And I guess we should shout out Rory Kinnear, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Very competent, and he's one of those guys. He's a character actor of the highest order, where it's like it's a giant compliment to have the body of work that this man has. And he gets to be the star of this movie because he is doing a Mike Myers where he's like 17 different people. But like, there's almost not enough You know what I mean? Like, I almost thought there was going to be more to it. I thought he was going to have more significant roles to play. You know, like there's maybe like 3 that are important throughout the entire movie, or 4, I guess. And yeah, and like, because they tease you with stuff in the trailer, but that's because that's all that they had to work with. Like, they give you this notion that there's going to be more interactions, more bizarreness, because every male character in this movie is played by him. Sometimes they're just CGing his face onto like a child actor, or, you know, he's just wearing fake teeth and a wig, but he does deliver very capable, you know, archetypes of the British male, you know, as we, you know, people across the pond have come to experience them through film, basically. Like the creepy vicar, the weird, like the creep, you know, they're all creepy. You know, all the men in this are creepy, you know, and kind of unsavory and unsettling. And, you know, Harper never puts off, like, what's the actress's name again?
Jessie Buckley.
Jessie Buckley, who was playing a very similar role in I Am Thinking of Ending Things, you know, to a point where she's just kind of walking through a surreal nightmare. And this movie is, like I mentioned before, it's an algorithmic, you know, nightmare where, like, there is dream logic at play, and it almost doesn't matter what is real and what isn't. You know, things are just happening. And like, even by the end of the movie, the final frame of it, it does leave you with some ambiguity about what did or didn't happen, but it doesn't matter what did or didn't happen because the movie just ends. It was just me and another guy in the theater, and that dude whipped his phone out to check the internet to see if there was an after credit scene like it was a Marvel movie, because he was just so aghast that, like, wait a minute, that's what it ended, that's how this ended. And I was just like, hey man, like, this is just what it is. You know, take it or leave it.
Yeah I guess to just kind of, I want to speak, I guess, a little bit about what we liked about the movie, if anything. I don't know if there was anything that caught your fancy, but I did, to go back to Rory Kinnear, I did like the Jeffrey character.
Yep. That
was probably the one that got the most screen time. And I liked some of the stuff they did with him, like, especially with the, there was the scene where he was going to go outside to protect Jessie Buckley from whatever was out there. And then he said, you'll never be a soldier or something like that. And she was like, what? He's like, oh, but that's something my father said. You would never make a good soldier. And so that was kind of cool. I like that sort of bit of character development. And then I did like the scene as sort of a cordoned off scene by itself. I did like the scene under the bridge when we still didn't really know what was going on. And when she was doing the playing with, like, the echoing, and then suddenly you see the shadow at the end of the tunnel.
That was fucking dope.
Upright. That was pretty cool. That was pretty well done. But yeah, what about you? Anything that you took from the movie that you liked? Or
I'll just want to throw Jeffrey up there because look at that smile. And he just wants to do his crosswords and drink a pint of bitter. You know, he's a simple man. You know, he's just running an Airbnb. But like, that's this movie just left me wanting so much. But like the slow burn segments were the parts that worked the best. Ultimately, I thought, like before it just, you know, starts veering off wildly in 17 different directions and not doing any of it well. It does do the first act of a horror movie pretty good, I would say. And like, and even like her run, like after the you know, the bridge scene, when she realizes that there's someone there and they're coming towards her, that whole sequence kicked off from there, worked really well. And like being trapped in, or being in your house and feeling like you're safe, and then the audience being in on the fact that danger is literally peering through the windows at her, like, that stuff kind of had my hand in my mouth at times, just being like, you know.
Yeah.
And I guess I do need to, like, shout out one bit of high strangeness that like that was working for me was like when the guy reaches his hand through the door, like the slat of the door, and she stabs it. We're veering into spoilers, but it's this big key off that we're not just in a regular movie anymore, and it's when he slides his hand through the knife until it's split in half, and how that hand was used from then on through the movie just grossed me the fuck out, and it was something I had never seen before. Because it's kind of like, even though like all the nerves should be shot, none of the muscles should be working. Operating on dream logic, it's like prehensile, and it still operates as though it's like this thing that isn't human. And it really made me want to know what it was and what the fuck was going on. Because this thing was, and that's why it's ultimately a disappointment, because it didn't matter to Alex Garland to even explain it to himself. It's just something that was happening, But at the same time, it's the one thing I still think about is like the shot of the split hand like grabbing her neck, and really, like that kind of stuff. And
how there was like two fingers on each side of her of her back.
Like that stuff. That gave me the willies, and it could have been used to greater effect in a different movie, I would say. But I guess we might as well just dive into the deep as this movie goes. The part that the only thing people are going to be talking about is the birthing metaphor that comes at the end of the movie, where all these different incarnations of a Kinnear just start showing up to her, and then like either through like a vagina in their taint, a vagina between their shoulder blades, giving birth to, and literally out of the mouth of one, like they start giving birth to all the other versions of themselves, because misogyny begets misogyny. The patriarchy just makes more of itself. It perpetuates. Because like, what did you make of the dandelion imagery?
I was going to ask you about that. There's a handful of things in the movie that I have absolutely no idea, what the theme is behind it, and that was one of them that I was going to ask you about, because I have no guess at all.
Because it shows up in the middle of the movie, the green man, like I guess I had showed a picture of him before. He's like this homeless guy who's just running around naked throughout the movie and her stalking and harassing her. And eventually he like shows up looking, because he like cuts a slit in his forehead and sticks a leaf there, and that's the beginning of his leaf face, which is a reference to some like Anglo or like early Anglo like god figure that they had. And he blows dandelion, like seeds, the petals, spores, and one goes into her mouth and then kicks off the hallucinatory sequence that ends the movie. And it's even like the last shot is all of those spores coming back together to form the dandelion in reverse. And I guess that's because I don't know the biology of dandelions. I'm assuming those are male plants. I don't, maybe, because they're shedding their seeds. I don't know. I'm not a botanist, but it seems like it is a strange thing to keep on recurring and then offer nothing really textually to build off of it. I'm sure YouTube and film students will dive deeply into some of the dialogue delivered by like the vicar character, because he's the one who does all the talking that needs to happen. There's a lot of that's interesting, but the idea that the problems with men within the species of humanity are so deeply rooted in a part of us that they cannot be undone is just such a lame observation to make. Like I would expect it from a 20-something feminist filmmaker, like a woman, like I would expect it from one of the chicks from Red Eye, directing a movie. But from Alex Garland, it just seems like he's not trying. And I guess we might as well dip our toes into like some of the things he has said, since the movie's release. Yeah. And because he has go ahead.
Real quickly before we do that, well, we're still on kind of the weird symbolism.
Yeah.
The one thing the other thing I wanted to ask you about was, I don't know if you have any sort of theory for this, but was there anything behind the other tunnel being blocked off? Do you know that? Like when she was, running away from the guy running at her in the tunnel, and then she came across that other tunnel that was completely sealed.
Because she misses the path that she took down to that path. Yeah. And she just keeps on walking. I guess, I don't know. I guess maybe the idea is that there is another way. This is kind of Alan Moore, to a degree, if you think about like how he operates. Because there probably was a more feminine man and culture that existed, but at least for Britain, it's sealed off, it's closed off. We can't get in there now. That might be what he's trying to say, because like From Hell basically boiled down to Masonic rituals to prevent a feminine century, and there might just be I think that kind of like that there might be something to that. I would say that's where I would go with that.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that was just odd that he chose to focus on that in particular, and it didn't really. It was never seen again, basically.
Yeah, because in theory, you're just watching a horror movie, and our heroine is being chased by some figure that she can't see. He's just a shadow to us at that point, and you almost get the impression that the camera itself is her stalker, which is kind of effective at times, and in the notion that but then again, like It Follows kind of did this too, and this movie just made me think about better horror movies and better, I guess, even like the logic and ideology behind other horror movies that just worked better than this one, because so much of this was just half-baked.
Yeah.
And that might be contributing to, I guess, what I was alluding to when I threw his picture up, was that he has imposter syndrome. Of all people, Alex Garland has imposter syndrome and thinks that he's a fraud and that he's no good, basically. Like, have you read any of his, like, I forget where he was interviewed in, whether it was the New York Times or somebody like that. But it's kind of why he's talking about retiring from directing and just going back to screenwriting, because he just doesn't feel like he's suited to it. The social aspect of it, and also just truly being the singular vision behind it. He operated better when he was handing projects off to Danny Boyle, to take his scripts and do something with them. Yeah, I guess is kind of where he's coming from, but he might just be burned out, because after this movie wrapped, after he was done with Men, he had 2 days off, and then he started working on his next project, Civil War, which is going to be like some sort of sci-fi military action movie. And yeah, he might just be burned the fuck out, which is understandable.
Sounds like it, yeah. I mean, if this was the only movie that we had of his that he directed, I would probably agree with that, honestly. But there's something to be said for the fact that I think he has, before this, 3 relatively successful to very successful things that he has directed in Ex Machina, Annihilation, and Devs. And so he might think that, but I would say that overall he's a great director.
I mean, hell, he didn't he wasn't on the set directing it, but I found this out in research, but apparently he did enough work in the editing of Dread, which was based on a screenplay that he wrote, that he almost should have a shared director's credit on that movie. Like, he's uncredited as a director, because he took what the director was shooting and he was the one giving notes to the editors of that film instead of the actual filmmaker who's credited as the director. And yeah, but you're right on about the fact that like we have a lot to look at as examples of what he's capable of, and that's why this movie feels so hollow and empty, because everything else he does is just so chock full of ideas and concepts, and then is at the same time playing with them and having really interesting characters get caught up in his, you know, in whatever the notion is. And they're just, and ultimately I've been using that word a lot, because when you just boil it down, there's not much to this. Not as much as one, at least I didn't. I expected a lot more out of it than what he gave me, and I guess that's why I'm so critical about it.
Yeah, that's for sure. It if anybody wants an idea of, you know, in sort of one sentence of what this movie is, just think of an entire film of the lighthouse, like, interpretive dance scene from Annihilation. That scene as an entire movie, and that gives you an idea of what Men is, and whether or not you'll like it, because I know that's in his past works, that is a scene that really divides people as to whether or not they love or hate Annihilation, because there's people out there that absolutely hate that end scene, but then there's some that love it.
And so that's why I think it's so funny that, like, because we're most of his, is he a 90% Rotten Tomato tier filmmaker, or like, or some of his movies rated less than that?
It probably depends on how far back you go, because you know, and if you include the stuff that he screen wrote on, because you know, there's a lot of Danny Boyle stuff that because Alex Garland wrote The Beach.
That was his big breakout.
Yeah. So, but no, I don't think it's that. I wouldn't think that it was that high, because some of his movies, while they're probably not as divisive as this one, I do think that they are. I mean, Ex Machina is, I think, pretty well regarded, because it's not very challenging, I don't think. But I think Annihilation is a little more challenging, and that divides people. And then Devs, I think, is even more so. There's people out there that really hated that show, and I loved it. But
it was great. Yeah, and it had so many great moments in it, and really memorable, you know, characters, and just like the monologues in Devs fucking rule. And at the same time, like I said, it's like he takes ideas and plays with them in a way most filmmakers wouldn't. And because there's a lot of movies like Ex Machina out there that are really trite and lame and aren't nearly as fun and entertaining, because you didn't have characters like the one that Oscar Isaac was playing, you know, or like Alicia Vikander's robot, you know, like it's like you're getting gamed. The audience is getting worked by the situation as much as the characters are. You know what I mean? But in this, there's no real through line. It's just spaghetti on a wall, and that can be modern art. I'm not denying that, but yeah, anybody expecting a popcorn experience is going to be like traumatized. And people who know what like know him and have some bearing for what they're walking into are going to be like a little let down, or I could see some people just like lavishing praise on this movie a little too thickly, you know, just, you know, because it tickles, you know, their ideological funny bone a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, if I were a true blue feminist, I'd be a little pissed off at this movie. like you've got, because like he hasn't lived this. You know, it would almost make me wonder what skeletons are in his closet, since he's trying so hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then before I forget, I guess, speaking of Devs and Ex Machina, shout out to Sonoya Mizuno, who she made her cameo as the female police officer in this.
That's right. Yeah. I almost
from Devs. So.
I almost didn't recognize her. Holy shit!
I didn't at first either, but then I went and looked at the cast list for this, which is like 5 people, and she's one of them. So,
and I guess we might as well shout out Harper's doomed husband. He's been I forget his actual name, but he's in a lot of different things. He played Kwame in I May Destroy You.
Okay.
I just want to get his name
for his
Papa Esadou.
Okay. Yeah, for his I don't know, 10 minutes of screen time, he was great. And those argument scenes were pretty rough.
They were. And I guess this is a little personal, but I couldn't help but think about this. This comes from my job. A couple weeks ago, I had to go to court and sit through the beginnings of a murder trial that had already been finished. This guy was convicted in 2018, and then the Supreme Court overruled it for technicality, so they were having to prosecute him again. But it was a domestic dispute, much like the one in this movie. It boiled down to you need to get away from me. What the fuck is on your phone? Unlock your phone. What are you saying? Who are you saying it to? And it getting violent as a consequence of it. And I couldn't help but think about this real story that happened here in Minot, while I was watching it. Because that it's such a common thing to happen in the world we live in today. And it is not wrong to make that the focal point in your movie. But what exactly were we supposed to take away from it beyond that domestic violence is bad? You know what I mean?
That's it. I mean, that's, I guess to kind of start wrapping it up, that's the entire thesis of this movie, are very, very obvious, hollow, surface level observations. Like, men are pigs, women have it hard, evil men beget evil men, and that's it. But it's just those one sentence little statements, and there's nothing under it. There's nothing following it, So.
Well, it's too bad. It really is too bad. Because not to say that this isn't worth a watch. I would, if you're into something weird, like weird cinema, if you got a kick out of Antichrist, or I'm trying to think of other films that are like this. That
I would kind of compare this to the remake of Suspiria.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's
in the way that it progresses, and how it's very slow, and then it just kind of goes batshit in the last 20 minutes.
And I also just kept on thinking about the movie Mother at the same time, because they're both so obvious and ham-fisted in their approach. At least this had moments that were genuinely scary and unsettling. Mother just had people eating a baby. You know what I mean? But it's worth a watch if you're looking for something different. But maybe watch Devs instead. And probably watch Annihilation. I recommended Annihilation to a ton of people. It was always hit or miss, unfortunately, because you got to be careful. It's kind of like this movie's kind of like recommending Irreversible, maybe not as extreme, but the ending will definitely break the minds of the fragile. So be discerning as a movie watcher. Coming out next week, there's quite a lot of things coming out. We got Top Gun Maverick, of course, in theaters. That's going to be our subject next week. We're going to return to the age of jingoism in Hollywood again. I think it does say something that, when Tom Cruise was promoting Born on the 4th of July, he very much wanted to make it clear that war was bad, and he just views Top Gun as entertainment. That was for kids. That was just fun. War is bad. And here we are we're on the precipice of World War III yet again, and we have another Top Gun movie.
Yep. Yeah, I can only hope that when the movie ends, my crowd breaks out in a USA, USA, USA.
That would be dope. I hope that the screening actually has people in it, because I wanted to have more people in the theater for men, because I wanted to see someone walk out, but it was just me and one other dude, and unfortunately we both were here for it, so there wasn't anything fun. Part 1 of Stranger Things, season 4, the final season. As is tradition with finale seasons, you got to break it in half to just milk that cow as long as you can. But I have seen no footage of this. Like, what do you know about season 4? What can we expect?
Not a whole lot. I've kind of tried to stay away from it too. All I really know is the way that they are releasing it is so strange, because not only is it being broken up into 2 chunks, but the first chunk, with the one that drops next week, is 7 episodes. And then the second chunk that will be coming out in July is 2 episodes.
But those episodes are like feature length. That's something I read. Like the finale is like 2.5 hours long.
It's nuts.
It's nuts. Like no show, I guess, except maybe Game of Thrones kind of did it that way. But Jesus Christ, like, nobody does this. And why is this? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But the Depper Brothers might just be a little high on their own supply. And Netflix is just begging for a win here. They desperately need it. Apple TV Plus has an awesome looking CG dino nature show narrated by David Attenborough and like produced by Jon Favreau, called Prehistoric Planet. God, like if I still were a pot smoker, it would be like appointment viewing to just grab a bong and just sit down and just have it wash over me. And it just looks.
This is also the score is Hans Zimmer too.
Whoa, shit, dog! Oh god, even better. Disney Plus is going to be releasing Obi-Wan Kenobi at long last, so we'll just get a taste of the new era of Star Wars by going back to the era of Star Wars that needed the most rehabilitation. And they're just lucky that the prequel trilogy was so memeable, because that's the only reason why Gen Z has any affection for it. Because speaking as a millennial, it is just memes all the way down. That's all that it has, is the memes. But I know that all of the actors, like Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor, both are like, thank God people like our movies again, because they really were ashamed for a long time about how those were received.
Yeah.
Bob's Burgers, the movie, is going to be in theaters. I'm going to go because I need to pump my numbers up, because I got to catch up to Matt somehow, so my $13 will contribute to that. And as a lover of the TV show, I also have to support it, just because I love those kids. I love Bob and Linda and all the wacky people in that town. I was never a Simpsons guy growing up, but I truly have affection for that show and the world of, I forget the name of their town, but it's a little ocean town, and they just sell burgers, and it works. But
so, as somebody that watches the show, is this meant to be some sort of like finale to the show, or are they going to continue making the show after this?
I don't know. Like, I think I said earlier that I hope it is like a series finale, but okay. I feel like it's like Fox doesn't cancel anything if it has an audience. Yeah. Like the Family Guy will never die, The Simpsons will never die, and very well Bob's Burgers could never die. It would, and that's just how it goes. But in my head canon, this movie might be the last thing that I watch, because the whole plot of it is, oh no, we're going to lose the restaurant. Like that's never something that truly looms over them. Like they're always financially unstable. They're always like broke as fuck and having to find some way to make it going. But part of the allure of the show is the fact that despite everything going wrong, they can still find a way to scrape by and, love each other. It's wholesome in that way, and it's not a cynical show. And I think that's why it appeals to me so much.
Sure. Yeah.
But then we have this thing called Emergency coming to us from Amazon Prime. What is it?
We were talking a little bit about it before the episode, but this is kind of another one of those festival darlings. It screened at a bunch of festivals last year and got nabbed up by Amazon Prime. And this is about just a smaller movie about 3 college students, 3 guys who return to their dorm after a night of partying, and they find a woman passed out in one of their beds. And then the movie is kind of them.
Is that Dookie from The Wire? Is that Dookie from The Wire?
Oh, maybe. I don't know. It could be. But they find her and kind of debate whether or not they should call the cops, essentially, because they don't want the situation to kind of be taken the wrong way. And
that's right. Okay.
It looks interesting, and it got a lot of good buzz from the festival circuit. So
it kind of reminds me of, like I saw the trailer before Men, but Bodies, except that's about young women being stuck with Lee Pace and what the fuck is his name?
Pete
Davidson. It's a locked room mystery. It's 10 little Indians, but this definitely, it's a familiar genre, but it's time for the boys, to take it over. This is how Gen Z deals with dead bodies in the apartment after a party. All right, I'm here for it. And that wraps it up for what's releasing next week. There's quite a bit, actually. We're gonna have a lot to talk about. But of course, if you want to, catch up, watch along with us for the main review, definitely see Top Gun Maverick, which could totally fuck up the summer movie wager and be the real movie of the summer, because film critics are just like they're like in tears from this movie. We do have another parting question, coming to us from Matt. Let me just click around here and get it up. But I really liked it, and I have to bite my tongue real hard because I just want to say my answer to it. Why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a story behind this one, but I'll say it first. So the question is, who is a filmmaker who seemingly disappeared off the face of the earth, who you would like to see return to filmmaking? And the me coming up with this was kind of spawned from, I for some reason thought of that movie from 2019 on Amazon, The Vast of Night.
Yes, okay. Movie? I do, yeah.
And I was like, whatever happened to the guy who made that? And so I looked it up. His name's Andrew Patterson. That is his only credit, is that movie. He hasn't done anything since then. And there's absolutely nothing on the internet about what he's doing now and what his next project is going to be, other than one single sentence on his Wikipedia page that says he is making a untitled film, a revenge thriller set in the honeybee industry. And that's it. There's nothing else.
So, because how long did Robert Eggers make us wait for his next movie? Or like he took a few years to get a new movie out of him.
I want to say it was 3. Yeah, 3.
3 years. But because some of those people, if they really hit, they're just churning those fuckers out. Like the gentleman who did Hereditary and Midsummer. Like there's nothing stopping that guy from making movies. He's just doing it, probably because he's not making revenge thrillers about the honeybee industry. It's a little obscure, but I really like this question. Like, I wrote down like 10 different names and just started like singling them out. Like, which one would I pick? Because there's a lot of people out there, whether they have storied careers that lasted a long time and then just stopped. Or, like this guy. They're one, and then they just fall off the face of the earth, and nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. because they're probably just, doing like, commercial production work just to, and trying to get someone to read the script for this. You know what I mean? Because like, just because Amazon picked up your indie darling doesn't really actually mean you're going to be getting your next thing made. You're going to have to, suck a few dicks before that'll happen for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I that wasn't my answer to. I've got another one that I'm going to use next week, but
that's the one that made you think of it. Yeah. Very good. Well, that kind of wraps it up for the show today. Men was, it was fun at times, and it just kind of is infuriating in retrospect. Maybe just watch some movies from like Peter Greenaway or Lars von Trier. You'll get just as much formalism, but there's a lot more deep in the guts of those movies than in this one, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But thank you for joining us, everybody. And thank you, Matt. And we'll see you all next week with Top Gun Maverick.
Yep. See ya.
See ya.